no good. Rebounded by Anthony. 2 seconds left. Anthony for the win. Got it! Rolls it! Cole Anthony gives the Magic a victory.
Close Up Magic.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Close Up Magic. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron, and as always, we got my man, Malik Grady. What's going on, man?
Not too much, man. Just living the dream, enjoying talking about the Orlando Magic. In this early part of the season, it's just good times, some bad times, obviously, but for the most part, just good times. Always great to be able to talk about the Magic during the season.
Yeah, and we had a really cool guest this week. We had Mark Schindler. You will get to that interview that we had with him coming up shortly. But if you follow NBA at all, and you're on Twitter, you know who Mark Schindler is. He's a really great journalist. He's been with a couple different outlets right now. He's currently freelancing, but he's a really good basketball mind who really enjoys the Orlando Magic and has written multiple articles about them so far this season. And we'll get to that interview shortly. We got a couple segments to get through before. But first, it's before we get into all that, let's just get into the housekeeping. We're just going to keep reminding you all every week. Merchandise is here. I'm wearing the Close Up Magic hat right now.
Looking good.
It's great. I love it. It's actually a really good fit. Sometimes you get like hats that like a little too tall. This one just fits just right. I really like it. Good quality, good press on the logo there. So good prices too. Go hit up our merch. Get yourself some swag for the season. The link is in the show description below. We couldn't do merch without our network that is awesome and supports us. 19 Media Group. 19 Media Group also just got us a new show sponsor, and we're doing our first sponsored show by them today. And so you'll hear that ad coming up in a little bit. And then, as always, we're trying to grow. We'd love for you to help us grow. Subscribe, leave a review, share with a friend if you can. And guys, last but not least, we got this Patreon program we're really excited about. We just kicked it off a few weeks ago, and we're already adding upgrades and updates to the program to continue to make it a better service for you. There's two different tiers. There's a $5 and $10 tier that you can support us at. They come with different benefit packages. The first and main thing is we're trying to build a community. We have a Discord group that is already starting to pop off and get pretty active. That is a bit different of a conversation than what we hold on Twitter. We have different sub channels within the Discord to really talk about, we can talk about the Lakeland. We can track different things. And it's really been a benefit for Malik and I to use as a tool for us, but also to communicate with our current Patreons and hopefully you all that will potentially sign up, in the coming weeks, hopefully. And other things we're doing too is we're adding more to the current Patreon packages. We recently did. We're gonna be adding more content just for you that is not going to be for everyday listeners. And what that looks like is specific game breakdowns. We had our writer Xavier Green, who's a really talented young basketball mind, deep dives into draft and game film breakdown, and he broke down the Kings game, and this was an amazing thread. And we're still going to do that for the public, but once or twice a month, we're going to be breaking down specific games just for our Patreons, where you see the film cut and really easy, fun, digestible ways to kind of view things a little bit differently. Malik, what was one of your favorite aspects of this thread that our patrons are going to get to see as they sign up?
Well, I just like the way that getting someone who not only knows the Magic, but obviously has that kind of draft background, being able to, get some bite-sized views of the game where during the game, a lot of times things are happening so quickly and you're just kind of going with the ebbs and flows emotionally of what's happening. You don't get a chance to kind of get back and see, well, what was happening here? What kind of plays were being run? What was the mindset maybe on either end? And you're able to actually see that from play to play as the game goes on in these type of breakdowns. So we appreciate that. And I think it has a lot to offer to, not just our fans, but also just Patreon listeners, that kind of stuff. And, people are trying to support us. It's a kind of reason to support us and kind of get involved in what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And so we're going to have that. We're going to have more bite-sized content just for our Patreons. We're going to have these little 5 to 10 minute videos and audio segments just for you. And, we're also going to be doing giveaways. And so we appreciate you all for considering signing up for the program. All right, enough about that. Malik, let's get into Magic basketball. That's why people are here and want to talk to us. So,
Absolutely.
Magic, since we last talked, we're 1-3. Since our last episode, they won versus Golden State in a really exciting game. They lost versus the Thunder, versus the Kings and Rockets. The Rockets game we lost in was the first game that we were actually favored in as a team, but we couldn't guard the 3-point line to save our life. So that was a big disappointment. We're not going to get into the games too heavy, but what are your thoughts on the games that you've seen in the last week?
Well, it's really just wild the way that the ebbs and flows of a week can go. You go 1-3. The win against Golden State was spectacular. Jalen Suggs with a breakout game. You have the highs of watching Steph Curry play so well, but you're able to match them blow for blow and get a win out in the end. And the other 3 games are all games that you feel like you could have won, you should have won. How different is it if we're talking about the Magic going 4-0 or 2-2, or in that stretch where instead of being 2-9, you're 4-7 or something like that. So it's really wild to me just how differently the views of the team, how hard you might want to be on certain players or on the coaches are based on just that record. It's really wild to me, especially with so many players out, that we have such a range of how we can view this team and all. That's what really sticks to me.
I think for me, I'm starting to gather enough data to know what I think should be improved regardless of where we're at with some of the individuals that are out. There's obviously things will improve when we get healthy players back, but I think there's things now that are already showing to me that are concerns. Like we get into this a bit with Mark, but like communication on the floor, that these guys do not seem to communicate well on the floor. Defense is an issue for this team right now. And it's like, Philip Rossman Reich was talking about this, on his podcast this morning. It's like the offense seems to be clicking more than the defense. And that was a little bit of not what the expectation was going to be for this team. Defense was supposed to kind of carry from last year, and we kind of ended the year on a really nice defensive run. And, we do have guys that should be positive defenders, but our defense is not working. And so I'm starting to kind of like try and figure out my emotions based on individual players and circumstances, but also kind of running themes that we're continuing to see with this team. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm not sure, how much better some of those things could be with so many players out, or with so many limited players. Like obviously Bol has been spectacular offensively, but with his high center of gravity, with the way his feel is, there's a limit to how good he can be individually as a team defensively. You got Paolo as a rookie. You got Jalen Suggs, who's a great defender. You got WCJ. You got guys off the bench, none of whom really you want in your rotation when you have everybody healthy. So it's like, how good can or should those players be and all? Should they be better than they are right now? Should they be winning those games? That's definitely, up for discussion and on the table and all. But it's tough. You want to bash them in some ways, but you also kind of want to be like, well, how good should they be with 5-6 guys out of the rotation, and some of your best guys being, like I said, low ball being out there. So it's kind of wild to think about. So,
but something like, I hear the injury thing. I'm not trying to excuse it too much. But at the same point, like, look at our starters, right? Realistically, we potentially only out one guy in the starting rotation. Suggs could be a starter when Fultz comes back, and Bol could be out of the rotation. Like, that's that. And those are the starters get the majority of the minutes on the court. And so we definitely have injuries to some key guys that are going to make big differences. But at the same point, it's not like half our starting lineup is out. It's right now. It's
who
really
do you have
one guy
besides that, though?
It definitely affects the second unit, but I'm just like, there's things we can hold to a higher standard, right? Like if you see issues with the starting lineup and the starters, like, well, you can't blame that because half the second unit is out, but because the starters play together, they're the lineups are all over the place, but like starters play next to it. They start and end in the game, and a lot of the times, and they play the majority of the minutes next to each other, right?
I guess what I would say is that spots 6, 7, 8, and 9, like none of those players are guys that you want in the rotation.
I agree,
and really, that's a huge problem because no one plays the entire game.
But I think there's themes you can pick up based off our starters, like, hey, giving up 48 3-point attempts. I don't care. That's not who we had on the floor's problem. That's a systems problem. That's a coaching problem. That's not a, that's not a Cole Anthony is injured problem. Like,
no doubt. But I guess what I'm thinking is that, obviously that's a kind of systemic problem. But the bottom line is that when you put anyone in off the bench, anyone, like any player, the drop off is so extreme.
Sure.
There's just it's just a tough thing because, like I said, there isn't anyone.
I guess I'm bringing it up more as like. I guess it's more like I'm bringing this up as like these are themes I want to see addressed, but I wonder if they will actually be addressed as the team gets healthier.
Well, I guess what I would say is that how can you address it? That there's no one on the bench. You look down, it's like, oh yeah, we'll bring this guy and he'll stabilize it. It's like, no, there's really no one there and all. So
I hear you, but when you have chances to close games and your starters are in there and not the bench, just close games.
Except when they're gassed from being out there overextended.
That's an excuse. These are professionals. And it's 11 games into the season. Let's be real
and
here.
They've been in every game. They've had a lead in every game.
They haven't played that many minutes. Their minutes are pretty average for starters right now.
That's what I'm saying is the Magic have been in every game and had a chance to win. There's been maybe 1 or 2 games where they down the stretch didn't have a chance, but every game they've had a lead. So they've been right in there. They just haven't been able to.
And who closes games? It's starters, and it's not like this is a Tom Thibodeau situation where they're getting played 42 minutes a game, the entire thing. And so I'm not trying to get like this granular on it. I'm just saying it's like these are themes and concerns that I have now that I want to see improved as the team gets better that I'm not sure are because I doubt the coach. Like, I mean, like Malik, you went off for an hour last night and this morning on how much you hated coaching last night. Like, does coaching get better with better players? No, this scheme's going to probably suck regardless because, like, I don't think
that's what I'm saying. Specifically, I hate the idea of giving up that many 3-pointers. Like last night's game was just an abortion for me. To give up 28 3-pointers and a half, 48 3-pointers in a game, you can't win in the modern NBA in that fashion. That's outside of whether or not you have the rotations to win. Like we said last night against Houston, that was the first game the Magic were favored in a game for. They should have beaten Houston without question. That is outside of the fact of whether you have a team, 1 through 6, 7, 8 built to withstand against better teams and all. That wasn't the case last night. Was just that's why it was the most disappointing loss of the season for me. But you look at the other 10 games, when they're playing teams, you're in every game, you're competitive against much better teams. You're playing Boston, you're playing, some really good teams out there, and you're competitive and have these teams on the ropes in every game. Obviously, you let go of the rope against Houston because of some bigger problems, but those bigger problems haven't gone away just because you slipped up in some other fashion. So it's like I said, it's a little bit of both. I do have some real criticisms, but the biggest thing is that they just don't have the right amount of guys to get it done. But beyond that, is there an added benefit where if you had a better coach or a better scheme, you might be able to squeeze more juice out of the orange? Sure. Would you should the Magic be 4-7 instead of 2-9? Yes. But those 2 games, in my estimation, aren't enough to say that, let's get out the pitchforks and go from there and all. So that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we need a fire coach. I'm not saying that at all. I just have my concerns, and I'm not letting every concern be not valid because of injury. Like I'm past the point of injury being the excuse for every reason that I'm upset with this team. Like that's I think to me that's just like it just feels too easy to say that's the reason, because it's not. We've been in too many close games that we have had turnovers in. Well, are the turnovers because Kevon Harris is on the floor next to Paulo? Maybe, but sometimes the turnovers are on the starters, right? And
you also only have one point guard. You're not really a point guard.
Let's stop making excuses here. We have a turnover.
That's reality. It's not an excuse.
Yeah,
you have literally one point guard.
Yeah, but that's like, I don't think that's having one point guard isn't the problem. This team is turning the ball over. It is a problem, and I'm not excusing it, but the team has a turnover problem in general, like stepping out of bounds and like just being careless. Like those types of things are not, like, those can be fixed, right? Not every turnover is because someone had a bad pass, and the bad pass because a point guard was not setting up the offense, right? There's a lot of types of turnovers that are happening that are not point guard specific. And so it's what game was it? It was the Kings game. The turnovers in the third quarter. That was so much of that was not just because of a point guard issue.
Five of them were the 1 point guard on the roster, Jalen Suggs, and then when he's out, you don't have a point guard. So I think it is directly related to, again, roster issues. You have so many guards out, you have so many ball handlers out. I think it does kind of go hand in hand, but I'm not making an excuse on that. I think it's just fact.
It sounds like you're making an excuse. Excuse.
You don't have guys to handle the ball. You have one guy out there, and when he's kicking the ball over the court, it's a real problem. Those are just facts, not excuses.
Sure, but you can also do things coaching-wise and systematic-wise, and as a player, be smarter-wise to tighten up turnovers, right? And it's not just because Markelle Fultz isn't on the floor. We have games and periods where we don't turn the ball over the entire time. And then we have other periods for, where turnovers become a problem. And it's like, well, why are turnovers a problem in this quarter and they weren't in the 2 quarters before or the quarter afterwards? It's like
fatigue.
That's where it
roster issues. There's not enough guys who can handle the ball. I think those are just facts.
When you don't turn the ball over for the first, when you have normal turnover in the first 2 quarters, and then you have an abundance, like a horrible thing of turnover, that's not a point guard issue. That's a team issue.
Sure it is. It's all cumulative. I think it all builds on itself. I mean, when there's no one there to do those things. So
I think blaming it on injuries is it's the easy way out.
I think it's easy to say it's they just need to get it done, and not look at the actual full picture. I think there aren't any easy answers. There aren't any easy, there aren't any easy things to say in all this and stuff. It's a big problem. It's also just 10 games in, but you have a lot of guys out, you have a lot of guys in new roles. And yes, they're not quite getting it done, but they're in all these games and they're close. They're just not quite getting it done. So I guess that's where I would leave it and all. But
Anyways, we do have some good news to talk about because we're obviously not going to be on the same page with the turnover to conversation here. We do have some potential players coming back. Markelle Fultz just had a workout video being shown of him on the court with the trainer. There wasn't too much context to it. He was on the court, didn't have his boot on, doing some dribbling with one of the trainers. Just gives you hope that he might be, getting closer. And then Kobe Price had a pretty big article about Jonathan Isaac, and my conclusion, and let me know what you think, Malik, is my conclusion is that Jonathan Isaac's injuries are healed, and it's just him getting back into game shape because right now he's just getting exhausted way too fast. He's currently playing 5-on-5 versus the coaches when they are available. It didn't specify that he's playing 5-on-5 versus players. We also don't know if the players are playing 5-on-5 in their practices, versus each other, or if they are playing, or if it's like a coach integrated system. But he is currently playing with the coaches on 5 versus 5. And so it just sounds like it's a conditioning thing, getting him up to game speed. What was your takeaways with the JI article from Kobe Price, who rock star?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where it's hopefully it's a step forward. Hopefully it's a step closer to Jonathan Isaac coming back. We don't know what that means in terms of what kind of player he is now, how good he'll be if and when he does come back, how long he'll be out there. But again, it's a positive step because he seems confident he's going to come back. He isn't talking about any specific injuries or that, I mean, I play a day or two and my knee swells up or a hamstring or what have you and all. So it's all, the vibes are positive. But again, we've gone down some of these roads before. We were told that he was scrimmaging and getting close last year and going to be out anytime. And, he's leaking things on other podcasts about maybe he'll be back by Thanksgiving the last year, that kind of stuff, or Christmas. And none of that stuff happened. So we're all, Charlie Brown running towards the football with Lucy about to pull it away. So we're all wary, but still hopeful, still wanting, this to come true. There's no timeline. There's no hint of a timeline. There's no thing saying, 2 weeks, a month. So it could happen momentarily. It could happen sometime in the future. So we all just kind of wait and see. Mom's saying there might be something under the tree at Christmas, but if we pass that deadline, we're not going to be like, hey, Mama, where's my gift? January comes, February comes, that kind of stuff. So it's a tough situation for Magic fans. Like I said, we want to believe, but also part of us doesn't want to believe because we don't want to get hurt again because getting hurt sucks. Because when you hope, there's actually something to break. So it's like I said, it's a tough situation. It was a nice article to read, to have the positives happen and all, but we shall see.
Yeah. And yeah, again, I don't know what to take away from it other than he's, I guess, made progress, but this has been 2 years now, so we'll see.
Yeah. He's not in a boot. He's not limping around. There's no blood. I mean,
he hasn't had to have another surgery,
right?
in a while. No surgeries recently, which is all good. Yeah, we're doing all right. Well, guys, like we said at the beginning of the show, we have a new sponsor, and our sponsor is Manscaped. So here's our Manscaped ad read. Supporting For the Close-Up Magic is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precise engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped Performance Package, the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 7 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off, free worldwide shipping with the code CLOSEUP at manscaped.com. If my math is correct, that's 12 million balls.
It's funny. I'm looking at this math. So it's 12 million balls and 7 million men. I feel like that there's some men in here who maybe have had some injuries, maybe had some surgeries. I don't know. I didn't take that the first time we read it and all, but it's interesting. 12 million balls, but 7 million men. But hey, I'm not a math major. So anyway, what's your experience been so far since we got the product last week and all?
Yeah, we just got these products. We've used them a little bit. Think they're good, man. So I think for me, I like that they feel strong, they feel well made. This is their 4th generation trimmer, and it's made with ceramic blades that help reduce risk for accidents and cuts and stuff like that. And it even has an LED on it, a 4000K LED on it, which just kind of made things a lot easier. I didn't realize how much easier it would be with an LED light.
It was a dark and stormy night before then. I like that. Yeah,
exactly. It's a dark and stormy night. And then the other thing I really liked was it came with what was called the Weed Whacker, which is their ear and nose hair trimmer, and just super smooth. No cuts, no pulls. The Weed Whacker is waterproof, and now I haven't used it in the shower, so I still have not used electronics in the shower like that. Just not my thing yet. But the Weed Whacker was really good, and with the safe skin technology, it didn't have any snags or tugs as I was cleaning out the ear and the nose hair. What's your experience been, Malik?
Well, I actually did use the product in the shower and the light. So I kind of got the whole tunnel vision thing going on. Had good results to my experience. I also am liked the Crop Preserver ball deodorant and Crop Reviver ball toner to give you
Nice.
kind of that refreshing feeling in that area, kind of confidence to go out about your day. Just just bouncing around as one does. So I would say, trust me when I say this, your balls will thank you. And like I said, I just want to reiterate, get 20% off and free shipping with the code closeup at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code closeup, unlock your confidence, and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
All right. Now that we are past all the homework and the introduction, we're gonna get into a really cool conversation. We had Mark Schindler on. We get into Franz a bit, we get into Suggs a bit. It's just a really good conversation.
It's
So
almost like he's a Magic fan. I think he almost is, even though he's in the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana based.
he might be. He might
You be the judge, guys.
for sure. All right, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the conversation with Mark Schindler. All right, everyone. Like we said in the first segment of the show, we got Mark Schindler. Mark, how you doing tonight? Thanks for joining the show.
I'm good. I appreciate y'all having me on. I'm enjoying our Magic. So even though they're only 2-9 right now, but there's a lot of good stuff coming out of this. So I'm psyched to be on. Finally, could make things work on my end. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Mark, before we get into the Magic, let's get a little bit about how you got to where you're at now. You are one of the hardest working basketball journalists I know. It's like every other day you're either tweeting or posting an article. If it's not about the NBA, it's about the WNBA or some other random basketball player around the world. You're constantly watching film and appearing on other people's podcasts. This afternoon when I got home from work, you were live recording with Sam Vincini for Game Theory podcast, and you've been with him a couple of times. How did you get into basketball, and what kind of got you into this journalism route that you are on now?
Yeah, so it's actually really funny. I always told myself growing up that I was never going to be a sports journalist. I always had people ask me about getting into it because I just always loved sports growing up. But long story short, I went to Michigan State. My first couple years of school, I got heavily involved in boxing, was working on going on a pro career, and then I had some injuries pop up that made that pretty impossible. And I ended up having to kind of drop out of school, take some time off, and just get my health right again. And so I went from being somebody who was like a kind of casual, like I would watch the TNT games every week and play an ungodly amount of 2K in high school to,
Sure.
like I started watching like, a game or two every night. And then that progressed over like the next year or two to, watching like 3 or 4 games a night. And I think just like continually growing to like watch more and more of the game and appreciate it, especially like during the pandemic. Like I ended up a couple years later, but I ended up transferring to University of Toledo after spending some time at Ohio State. Been all over the place in the Midwest. And I went there with the intention of like just getting, deeper into figuring out what I actually wanted to do with my life now that, because, all the stuff that I kind of worked on wasn't going where I thought. And I took a class like on blogging 101 just as an elective to get it back into the swing of things with school. And I ended up writing about basketball on it, and that turned into what became Premium Hoops, which is defunct now because all of us who work there are like, have other jobs in basketball. But
Right.
Yeah, I started that, and then I just kind of ran with it. And the pandemic sucked, don't get me wrong, but I learned so much more about basketball and how to do things in media. And and it's kind of been a winding roads from then to there, but now we're here. So yeah.
And Mark, you've been with a couple different outlets over the years. Where where's like the best? Where's your home at the moment?
Yeah, so I guess the best place to call my home. Yeah, I mean freelance, so kind of everywhere. I do a lot of work for the WNBA as a writer over there. I work over at Dime Up Rocks, where you'll find most of my NBA words this season.
Yeah, that's where I've seen most of your work so far.
Yeah, and then I have a Patreon as well. just because I'm still, trying to make this work full time. So
Totally.
helps out with that. But yeah, I'm honestly kind of anywhere. I'm talking to a couple places right now and might be doing some other things. So
Sweet.
it just depends. But yeah, honestly, anywhere that is a good platform for writing about basketball, I'll find my way to.
That's
And,
awesome.
and Mark, do you work closely with Jackson Frank a lot? Because it seems like y'all's
Yeah, he's a
writings
really good
kind
friend
of
of mine.
overlap quite a bit. So
Yeah, really, really good friend of mine.
Okay.
Just through, like we've met up in person now quite a few times, but yeah, just through meeting through Twitter, talking basketball. Honestly, it's funny because I feel like most of my really close friends are people that work in basketball now, just because that's kind of the nature of the beast. Like once you get so deep in, but yeah.
Nice.
Well,
That's awesome.
that's where we've kind of come across you so much, because obviously Jackson has become enamored with quite a few Orlando Magic players and getting into like, whoa, what's this guy doing? Another 6'10" guy, Wendell Carter Jr., Franz Wagner, all that kind of stuff. So having the same thing for you that I've seen as well, that kind of enamoring of our players, which we love to see. So
Yeah, it's kind of funny too, not to get off track, but like I've always just kind of like enjoyed Orlando. Like I really the year that I think it was the year that Vooch got hurt was the year that I picked Orlando to finish like top 4 in the East, and that sucked. I was so sad about that, man. Because shoot, I'm trying to remember what they started the year, because they were playing well, and then Vooch misses like 2 months with I think it was a foot injury, if I remember correctly. That sucked. And then JI gets injured the next year, and it's like, don't even remind me, man. Like I feel the pain. Trust me. Like I've wanted this team to be good for forever, and I feel like they're on that path.
I feel like the Magic are one of those teams that are like the biggest what ifs. Like,
yes.
and you can have a what if on so many different aspects of the team, but it's like, what if Vooch never got hurt? What if JI never got hurt? What if Fultz and JI never got hurt? And like, where would this team be? And then you go back in time. What if the free throws weren't missed? What if Grant Hill was healthy? Just there's so many different random what ifs we could do with this team. But hopefully now we don't have to ask too many more what ifs because like we have, I guess you could be like, I guess the what if is, could we get any longer? That's like the current what if, I guess. Like, could we add more length?
6'9" wings.
If there's anybody in basketball who's gonna find a way, it's Jeff Weltman. Definitely. Him and Hammond do whatever they can to get as much length on the court as possible. So who knows, man?
Well, speaking of length, obviously, I guess earlier this week, maybe actually a week ago now, you wrote your article about Franz Wagner, saying how Franz Wagner's gotten better to start the 2022-23 NBA season, and you kind of got into some interesting things. What was your purpose in writing that? What kind of brought that out of you in the midst of all the other things that you're writing?
Yeah, I think it's mainly just because I watched. I haven't seen every single game now, but I watched like probably the first 4 or 5 Orlando games, and I've just been really intrigued by Franz because he was part of the first draft class that I got really deep into, and he's just really surprised me with everything he's done, the way that he's taken things on. Like I thought he was going to be a good player. Like I think he's already surpassed a lot of what I expected from him. I mean, for anybody, honestly, like this, it's been pretty wild. But the biggest thing is like just watching him at 6'10", 6'11", the way that he attacks, I think is like pretty uncommon. Like I wrote about it in the, like, I think like, I can't remember what my direct like turn of phrase was, but I think he gets like billed often as like not being aggressive in how he attacks basket. I don't really agree with that. I think it's just he does it in a very different way. Like he has such good touch that he's capable of doing the high glass finishes and these kind of lofty floaters and really funky extension stuff just because he's good enough to do it. And I just don't think there are a lot of guys who have been like that. But then he also he'll punch your shit on you, man. Like which I think that's always exciting to see. But
I think the phrase you used was that his finishing is an illusion, something like that.
Yeah. And I love it just because I love things that are like funky and different. And I think Franz is like the definition of that for me. And especially too, like, cause I was I was annoyed because I saw like a bunch of people were like going like, oh, he hasn't gotten better, he got worse because he can't shoot from three. I'm like, no, come on, man. Like he was legitimately doing good things, and like the finishing has gotten quite a bit better from him this year. I think it's just obviously more consistency and stuff, but like it's just watching this entire saying experiment sounds condescending, but just like it is kind of an experiment in a way, and like not intentionally, just with how many guys have been freaking out, like seeing the way that the offense has had to be run. Like it's been really honestly fun just to see the way guys are handling it. And honestly, like I think if they had better shooting around Franz and Paolo right now, then I think that it looks even better. But yeah, I mean it's been fascinating. Like I've loved the team, the way that they've come together too. Like I wrote about Wendell last year, who has not had like the best start. He's still been very good, but like to what I was hoping for the start. Like he had a kind of rough game the other night. He's still been like, I mean, I say he's had a like quiet start, and he's still like been probably the second best player on the team.
Yeah, I think to the Wendell point, it's like I think a lot of us were just expecting like a leap, and it's just I'm not gonna say he has his regress, but that the expectations of the growth that we were hoping to see in the offseason haven't been there. And maybe a part of that is just because of the funky lineups that coach is having to throw out there because of lack of player availability, and maybe partly because of scheme or something like that. Listeners of our show know that I've been a little bit critical of Mosley at times, even with the lack of player availability. And sometimes I wonder if part of that is why we haven't seen Wendell Carter like really take that leap we were expecting to. But I'm really trying to like just put pause on all those questions on coach until, I mean, sort of, I'm not really putting pause on it, but I'm trying to like allow myself to give a little bit of breathing room to it until this team gets healthier and we can see like the vision of the actual team. Cause I'm sure the vision wasn't to play Kevon Martin, Kevon Harris, 20 minutes in last night's game when we lost to the Rockets, like I'm sure that wasn't the plan going into the season. So it's interesting that you chose Franz, and I was rereading the article. I read it last week, but I read it again today. And man, he does have such like a crazy finishing package. Like it's absolutely insane. He can finish right, left, like in front of the basket, on the side of the basket,
floaters,
avoiding contact, like to, not have he can take contact a bit, but like, I feel like for me, the next thing for his finishing is learning how to create a little bit more contact so he can finish and get to the line a little bit more regularly. He's like almost too crafty, it's like, you brought up 2K earlier. It's like he's got the slithery finish icon or like a badge upgrade, like hit up to legendary, because he just knows how to like wrap his body around anything that might have contact. So like I kind of want to downgrade that badge if this was 2K so he could get to the line a little bit more. But yeah, he's been pretty good. I think the area that I enjoy a lot where we've seen him grow, Mark, and let me know what you think about this, is like we haven't had a playmaker, a traditional point guard on the team with Fultz being out, and then like Cole Anthony only being available, I think, for 4 games so far. And so he's had to pick up so much more on-ball handling. And I think that's okay to an extent, but part of what makes Franz special is his off-ball movement, the way he cuts off the ball. And so I feel like his role has just been like so much more on-ball than we had wanted. But it's almost allowed him to grow in that way as well. What have you seen with him so much more like on ball and as a decision maker, as far as like playmaking and whatnot?
I don't think that there's been like a massive making growth or anything. Like I think it's been, very good. Like it was really good last year for me too, but I think it's more like his handle seems a little bit tighter to me. I really like the way that I think maybe it's not a massive change, but I love the way that he's attacking drives, especially too with how cramped the lanes have been. He's been really good at like posting and reposting on drives. Like I think that's been a really nice staple for him. If like it's kind of a good ball security thing, but also just to kind of keep guys off track. So like if he, attacks out of the slot, gets somebody on his hip, he'll post them up and then get back to his right, drive again, post again. Like I really like when players do that. Anything that like, again, it's just crafty. It helps you get to the rim, get to the
changing
paint.
speeds and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I totally agree too. Like, I think it's almost like he's really good with the craft stuff, but I want to see him like start to sell out for some of the foul drawing, because it's not even like, I think part of it's like just the difficulty of being a player who's really good touch wise, because like he's like kind of just wired to make shots, and it's like, I don't know. I do think like that's definitely on the table for him to become somebody who can do that. Especially like, I mean, if you have really long arms, like he could really get away with some of the sweeping stuff to draw contact. But like, yeah, I mean, I couldn't be more impressed with him as a playmaker. I think like honestly, just once, like his assist numbers would be so much more bloated if you had guys actually making shots right now.
Yeah, totally.
Like I think he'd be up around like 6 assists per game if. And it would be very nice for my fantasy team too if somebody other than Terrence Ross was hitting shots. But
him and Paulo.
Yes, him.
Well, it's like the question I have with Franz. I wonder what's the best way to optimize him and optimize him with Paulo. Is it to have a slasher at the 2? Is it to have a traditional point guard? Is it to have just a guy who's more of a combo guy out there, a guy who's just nailing shots from outside? Like what would unlock him even more as a player and for the team? I mean, what do you think about that, Mark?
What I really want to see for this team, because to me, like obviously the front court is pretty set in stone for me. Like Wendell, Franz, and Powell. Like to me, that's going to be a special trio. Like I think, as much as I like Cole, I don't love just doing like, oh well, he's just going to be a 6-man. But I do think like in essence that is kind of what he does track as. I do think like there's ways that he could end up being a starter, like somebody like he's definitely comfortable being a spot starter. I think Cole does a lot of really good things that gets undersold.
Right.
But like obviously you want Jalen out there. I think to me it's a movement shooter. Like you really need somebody who can add a ton of shooting off, like it, not just like a catch and shoot guy, like somebody who's like, obviously you want more than just like quote unquote Doug McDermott out there, but like somebody who's like able to like fly off pin downs and do things that let you get a lot more funky with screens. Because right now I feel like teams are pretty comfortable just switching everything against the Magic, even if it's not perfect for actual like allowing matchups that you don't want to have.
Do you mean on their own, or do you mean other guys getting the ball to that guy? I mean,
let's say like if teams are willing to go under any screen that is being set for anybody that's not named Terrence Ross right now. Like especially any like the big to big screens that most teams have been pretty comfortable switching in the games I watched. And even if it's allowing like having like a small switch onto a big, like they're just kind of comfortable doing it because they don't really need to do anything else right now. Like it negates a lot of what the team can get out of it. So again, like I think a lot of it's just like getting more movement shooting and just having shooting development from the guys on the roster. It's like the stuff I really want to see.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that we will see a little bit better floor spacing when Gary Harris eventually comes back. He was finishing the year shooting 38% from behind the arc last year, and he's not necessarily like that movement shooter, but he does play well off ball, and he can space the floor, which is nice. But yeah, I would love get JJ Redick of 5 years ago on this team and just like let him run around like crazy. I don't think he's coming out of retirement. I don't think he's got the legs to do what he used to do anymore. But it would be nice to find that. I have hopes that maybe our second round draft pick, Caleb Houston, can get a little bit of that going on at some point. He's definitely got a ways to go before he's a rotation player, but he's a nice young shooter and does move well off the ball. But it would be also nice to find that via trade or, free agency in this coming summer, especially if it's someone that's got, I don't know. I don't want to get too into team building right now because I want to discuss more about what you've thought on some players, but I do like, I don't want to get too young. Like I want to address some of these problems with people that have current experience while also nailing draft and crushing it that way. But I feel like there's like trades and free agency that we can help solve some of these problems too in this coming year. Recently, just a few days ago, in your Friday column, I think it was Friday at least.
It was Friday.
You have your column about the most intriguing players, and the very first player you talk about is is Jalen Suggs. Why did you choose Jalen Suggs outside of you just being like a pocket closet Magic fan? That I'm just allowing that to be the thing. Why did you choose Jalen Suggs to headline this article of yours?
The Golden State game.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you not, man? Like that. I know he's only played like 6 games this year. Yeah, 6 games. And people can look at the percentage and be like, well, he's only shooting 25%. Like the shot just looks way cleaner than it did last year. It's not as clunky. It looked a lot better in preseason. I'm just confident that it's going to be better. I think, again, still going to be a work in progress. I think it's going to take time to get to where it needs to be. But that game was just huge for me. I know Golden State has been kind of shit to start the year, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
But that game to me was just huge. Like, and you could tell how big that was for the guys. Like, I know what the record is right now, but like to me, that was like the kind of win where I was like watching that, and it felt like everybody played well in that game too. Like at least had moments that were important.
There were bench contributions, and definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And I just like, to me, like that's the game where I pinpointed that. I'm like, that's what I want to see. Like that's the stuff that I'm gonna remember in a couple of years when this team is where I think they can be. And I think again, a lot of it is Suggs. Like to me, Suggs is the guy who unlocks a lot for this team. They need him to be that guy who can be a capable pull-up shooter, who can start sets for them, who can really lead things in transition, who can be an absolute dog at the point of attack. And defensively, he's been tremendous to start the year. He did that last year as well, but I think he's been even better this year in the time that he has played. And more importantly too, like the finishing is way better. Like he's so much better through contact. Like just anything in the lane, I actually have confidence in it going in this year, which is a huge improvement. And I think he's still going to have things to clean up with his handle. Like his handle is still really, really loose. And I think that's always going to be a thing. Like you can get that tightened into a point, but I think that there's definitely going to be like that's never just going to be something that goes away entirely. But again, like I think in that game, you just saw he was really good, just kicking things into action, saying I don't like just saying clutch, but part of what made him an awesome prospect was like he is kind of a gamer. Like he's somebody who is capable of taking the last shot. And again, like I think that's what makes it interesting too, because you have Paolo too. I think Franz could be that guy if he works into it, but more just like he brings everything where he can do things on the ball, he can do things off the ball. He's kind of a glue guy while also being a star, an eventual star, I think. And to me, like that's just fascinating because watching the way that he's going to grow and develop, and you can see how important he is for what the team is doing, especially when his shot's falling, because that totally changed the game.
Well, and that's what's so exciting, but also so maddening for Magic fans, because in that game you saw everything coming together. You saw the perimeter game, you saw the defense, you saw the penetrating, you saw the defensive instincts, you saw the coming to the fore in the clutch. And then the next 2 games, definitely much more of a mixed bag. Lots more spraying the ball all over into the stands when it comes to turnovers.
Rockets game was not
trying to
fun.
do too much. So all those type of things coming in, you're like, wait, is he this or is he that? Is he somewhere in the middle? And it's hard to get your finger on it because you want that consistency and everything like that, and you want to believe that this is the guy, but you forget he's played 54 games in the NBA over 2 seasons. Like he hasn't played much, and he only played that 1 year at Gonzaga, that kind of thing. So it's a mixed bag. Like I said, you see that one game and you want to predict the ceiling for him, but also the next 2 you're like, oh my God, is this guy gonna really dig us a hole? So
yeah no, it's interesting because like you mentioned, like the sack game, oh my God, he was so rough in the sack game. But Houston, like it wasn't terrible yesterday, but it was almost like I kind of wanted more. And to me, it was more just like the entire team was blah yesterday. Like Paolo was awesome offensive, but I think the whole team, like just cohesion wise, was not there. It was a weird game.
They gave up so many threes. I have nightmares. All the threes they gave up. So it's crazy.
We have a local reporter named Philip Rossman Reich of he's with the Locked On Network, and he's one of the hardest working journalists I've also met. But he has noticed with this team, and he goes to a lot of games, and he's got nice media passes that allow them to sit courtside, because the Magic are still one of the few that have a few handful of seats just for media at, within the first couple of rows, and then everyone else gets a second section. But he really feels like the Magic just don't have the communication on the court right now to allow things to gel the way they should, specifically on the defensive end. And I think outside of scheme, we also saw that last night versus the Rockets, with them going under on a lot of screens and, I don't know, just like allowing, what was the number, Malik, 48 threes or something like that?
Threes attempted by the Rockets. 28 in the first half.
Yeah.
So,
it was kind of obnoxious. And for me, I've been hammering on the defense all year that I feel like it just does not, like, we're supposed to be this long, athletic team that can run switches. I mean, there are certain players on the team that you kind of have to run a zone for, but like the defense just, it's felt very underwhelming all season. And we can get into the injury aspect, but even if you just look at the starters, which for the most part, like, the main defensive anchors for this team, have been healthy for a good amount of the year. And it's just, I don't know, it just feels like something's missing there. And maybe it's a communication aspect of it.
Yeah. And I guess the question is, like, do you, when you're looking at a team like the Magic, are there certain ways that you would want them to play? Do you would want to put them in better positions when you watch them, Mark? Or like, how do you view a team like that? Are you just kind of clawing at your eyelids going, oh, no, you have to do this, you have to do this. Why aren't you running this? Like, what do you see when you watch a team like the Magic?
I think for the most part on offense, I'm not really too concerned by anything they're doing. I genuinely like the way that Jamal Mosley runs things on offense. Like, I feel like he does a pretty good job of trying to blend everyone getting touches, which I think that's going to be a conversation eventually, just because there's finding a way to make 4 or 5 guys who are all capable of taking 15 shots a game happy is like, that's difficult. So I'm interested to see what that looks like, but I've been genuinely encouraged what he's done the last year or two. I think what's tough is that, especially with what the shooting is, things can look really a lot muddier than I think that they should, that, ideally they would. And that's just kind of constraints of the roster right now. Defensively is where I've been kind of like lukewarm.
Yeah, that's the one I look at. Defensive.
I think on one hand it's tough because like Cole is actually like a legitimately pretty good defender. I think a lot of people would just be like, well, he's only like 5'11", 6 foot, so he can't be very good. But I think he's solid, especially like I think he's probably a little bit better off the ball than he's on the ball. He's really good at the nail and stunting. But yeah, I agree, like on the communication aspect. I think their communication overall is just taking a hit on the defensive end. Like they were just so much tighter on the way that they were doing things down the stretch last year. And I think one of the things that's made it different, like they don't have the same weak side rim protection as they did last year, just by virtue of playing Mo Bamba less, because Wendell was playing at the 5 a lot and Mo would just rotate off like the weakest shooter on teams. Right. So I think in some ways Wendell's been a little bit overtaxed on defense because the perimeter defense has been pretty shitty, for being honest. Like Jalen's been good, but then again, it's just more like it's less about like individual defense. It's more just like, okay, on miscommunication on ball screens and stuff like that has been pretty rampant to start the year, in my opinion. I think that's been like putting them in a lot of the adverse situations they've had defensively.
Sure. Well, and then neither Paolo nor Franz is really a rotator, to the weak side for guys penetrating. If guys get past the first guy, neither one of them guys are kind of coming over to protect the way Mo Bamba was, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and it's not even that like that's everything, but I do think like, especially with how the defense was built last year and how successful it was, like that I mean, it's just been different. Like there hasn't been the continuity that I kind of was hoping would come over. And I think, missing Gary is probably part of that too, because Gary was really solid defensively last year. Like he's not a game changer anymore, but I thought he was still really good on that end. So it just makes it tough. Like it's just, and especially too, like just to be honest, like as good as Paolo has been offensively, like he's been really bad defensively. Like there have been some stretches and some moments where he does stuff in recovery, but for the most part, like he's getting blown by or back cut. And, I think that's stuff that's going to improve in time. I do think at large, people were probably way too low on what Paolo's defensive ceiling is going to be. But, we're seeing the floor right now and it's not been awesome. And that's also just
aspect for
noting.
sure,
Yeah. Well, that's also noting like the bench defense isn't exactly awesome either. Like I think, obviously Chuma can be good in the right spots, but Chuma is like the weirdest player in the NBA. I swear to God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like he has like some of the best hands I've ever seen on a player, but then he's not really quick enough to stay in front of anybody. He's not big enough to guard a lot of bigger 4s or 5s.
He's not bouncy.
Yeah, exactly. So he's just like he's really good at defending the slot as a help defender, or like even just making like a rotation low without even as long as it's like in like a secondary help capacity. Like, but he's funky, and I think he's been a little bit better this season, just given how rough his shot was last year. Thank God that he keeps the guide hand on. Like that was the thing last year. I generally like don't scream at my computer too much about like things that are happening in basketball, but every time
it's a little hit or miss. That hand kind of floats, man.
It was, but last year, I mean, there was that stretch for like 2 months last year where he just shot. It looked like a shot put. It was awful.
One-handed,
Yeah.
It didn't go in either. I was like, why are we doing this? Like, yeah, but sidetracked. But yeah, I think just
you're right.
Like the bench, it's tough because the bench is like it's not a lot of great defenders on the bench right now. But on one hand, though, too, like not to keep any sidetracked, but like it's tough because then they have stretches. Like there are the flashes, there are the stretches where it's like this looks really good. Like again, it was I think maybe 2.5 minutes of play, but that closing lineup against Dallas, like that defense was awesome. I was like because I think they ended up winning the last 2 minutes. They just couldn't score for shit. But
you were talking about the 151 seconds with Chuma.
Yeah. And like I mean, they show the moments of like being potentially dominant defensively because of the way that they can just play so big and long and be in the right places. But then again, yeah, it's just by virtue of being like so funky, I think that they get in their own way sometimes, and they just have to. Communication is going to really have to improve. But again, like it's tough to be too hard when 7 of the top 8 are 24 younger. So
yeah,
it's tough to account for that. Like this is a team that I really would like to see them actually make a trade to get an older guy in. That's not just T. Ross.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I was something I was really wanting to do for people for a long time know I wasn't really happy with the signing of Bol Bol this summer. I just and he's definitely outplayed what I thought he was going to do. Like he's had a great start to the season, and it's been a very pleasant surprise. I was very low on him, but mostly it's just because a lot of the reasons why I didn't want to resign him is because I just wanted to use that roster spot in a different way, and part of that was either leaving it open for just flexibility within the roster, but more so like I wanted to get this team a little bit older. I wasn't psyched on just having, Terrence Ross and Garrett Harris as the main veterans. We do have some like younger vets in a sense where, Markelle Fultz is going into his 5th or 6th year. So is Jonathan Isaac. But Jonathan Isaac isn't playing. Markelle Fultz hasn't played yet this year. And so it's like, you're missing a little bit of that. And it's just, I feel like you're right. This team will really benefit when they can just get a tiny bit more experience in the rotation. Mark, as this team gets healthier in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, and really just throughout the rest of the season, like what are your expectations out of this team as a, non-biased like Magic fan? Like what are your expectations for them this season and where they kind of be within what we call the NBA?
That's a good question. I think, like, obviously, I do not envision them as like a play-in team. I think that's played out already. Some people were a little bit too, and this is not me trying to do my own horn, but I think like as much as I was excited to see this team play, I think some people were a little bit too excited for what they could actually be this season. Like, and I don't mean that as a shot. Like, I mean, like I saw people putting them like 6th seed, which I thought was like crazy.
Well, to be fair, if you had Markelle, if you had Gary,
true, but exactly, I think like part of what was difficult,
part of what was like difficult
in parsing out the team is like knowing that somebody's probably missing time, which is what makes it suck.
Not
Because
5 guys.
because that's the other thing that I'll always go to bet for. Like everybody like talked about Markel, like, oh, he's just gonna be a 6 man. Like, no, dude, Markel looked like a starter last year when he was healthy. Like, he was really good. And he changes things for the team. But again, it's just hard to bank on him being healthy.
Yeah.
But I think to me, it's obviously not anything about wins. I mean, the team still has their own draft pick. I would imagine based on how the season started, they're probably pretty comfortable, banking on getting a good draft pick. Even then, I think they're just they're in a really interesting place because they've been stacking talent while also having talent that kind of fits together in a way. I think we still need to see it's going to take time to play out and see how it looks. But they're in a position where if they really wanted to take a step to be more competitive next year, which I think they want to, based on everything that the front office has said, because last year was supposed to be a blip, like the only year where they really took a step back. And at least that's the last thing that I remember Weltman saying over the summer. But I mean, to me, I think it's just finding their identity is the biggest thing for this group. It's because I think there are a lot of young teams where you can watch them and be like, I don't think that they have anything. Like for me, I know I have plenty of qualms with Oklahoma City, but Oklahoma City does have a defined identity. They are a very good defensive team. They have been for 3 years in a row now. Obviously, it falls by the wayside when they do their tanking bullshit, but they have a very concrete way of how they're going to play. And I think to me, that's what I want to see from Orlando. And I think to me, that is defensively being really good because this team has the personnel to be very good defensively. And it's not again, it's less about numbers, more just seeing the concrete, okay, we're getting better every month. You can tell, this is where we're improving. We're making things make sense. We've tested out the things we want to see. So just finding more ways to be creative, getting everybody involved together. And I think they've done a good job of that, but it's just, again, I think adding a veteran shooter would really help this team.
Well, I think that specifically that style of play, that defensive identity is kind of what some fans and outsiders are looking at, the difference between, Jamal Mosley and Mark Daigneault with OKC, with the way that they get in pass lanes, the way that they defend, they get out in transition, that we've just kind of been frustrated and not seeing what the defense is going to be. You're seeing a lot of zone played by the Magic for some reason. It's almost to a T, always abysmal. So it's just tough to see the plan when it comes to that. But that said, in terms of the fight of the team, in terms of how the team gets along, you're seeing great things as far as that's concerned. So it's kind of that tough dichotomy where you're like, well, what's OKC doing that we're not doing, where we can kind of point to a vision and something that might, stick when we get the talent in. So it's tough to say.
No, it's interesting. So I feel like in some ways OKC just has, they've been doing it for longer. So I feel like that has a bigger impact because they, again, even with them being such a different team, they have a lot more continuity for me. Especially considering how different the rotation is this year with Mo, other than, last night was the most Mo played this year, right?
In a while, definitely. Yeah.
I was going to say it had to be close. Yeah. And, so I think it's just hard.
But he's been bad for a lot of it too, so it's tough.
And I think a lot of the guys who OKC does have that are more of the role guys are really good communicators. And I think that's as much as I love T. Ross, nah, that's not him on the court.
There's no Lugens Dort on our team, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I think again, maybe that's stuff that I think will change because again, I'm just so in on what happened at the end of last year because to me that was very real. That wasn't I think a lot of people try to discount that as they're just a young team that they get feisty and other teams aren't playing hard. I thought yes, there were definitely some teams that didn't take Orlando seriously and they paid for it. The game against I don't think it was a back-to-back, but I think it was 2 games in 4 or 5 days against Philadelphia last year, which were Wendell's best games he's ever played and just absolutely dominated Joel. That's the best I've ever seen anybody play Joel Embiid, other than Marcus Gasol. It was unreal. But that, you saw the defensive communication, you saw how good they looked, and yes, the offense was really bad, but it's a different team this year. So yeah, I think Again, just like finding more of what that is, and it takes time. So I'm trying to be patient with them as much as I agree. Like I want to see it. I want to get back to that because that was awesome. So yeah,
it'll be nice when we can actually like evaluate this team with a healthy roster. Because so far it's there's been a few games where the Magic should have won. There's been a few games where the Magic should have just looked better in general. And I do hold that to like the current roster that they have, but also it's like, there's still always going to be this kind of floating excuse because like, well, half the roster is still broken and half these guys that would not be broken would be in the rotation right now. And so guys are getting close, thinking a month from now, we're talking about this team slightly differently because we're seeing different things in the rotation. At that point, you hope Markelle Fultz has been back. You hope Gary Harris is back. Jonathan Isaac there's an article on Jonathan Isaac recently that says, he's ready. He's just got to get his game conditioning up and whatnot, which I mean, with Jonathan Isaac, that could be 2 years of him getting his game conditioning in order, but hopefully it's just a few weeks to a month or so. But we'll see what happens here with this team. I'm looking forward to just watching them grow, as you mentioned, and just getting a little bit more experience and just letting this vision kind of like come unfold a little bit more and figure out if Coach Mosley is a good coach or not. I don't know. I haven't made that decision yet. If he is,
it's also about perception too. I mean, because we talked about 2 games ago, when Orlando beats Golden State, and Jalen Suggs has that great game. You're 2-7. You lose your next 2, and you're 2-9. But the expected win-loss for this team is 4-7 in terms of what they should have done and shouldn't have done. But 2-9 and 4-7 feels so different after 11 games, especially when you have guys coming in and out of the lineup and what's in store for the team. So some of it's perception, some of it's how it feels, but 2-9 definitely feels pretty awful for a fan base that is yearning to like have some sense of relevance and not being at the bottom of the barrel anymore. So it's tough.
Totally. Well, Mark, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you hanging out with us for the last 45 minutes. And why don't we just take a moment and I know you kind of said it in the beginning, but let people know where they can find you, where they can find your work, and your Patreon page.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate you guys having me on. This was really fun. You can find me on Twitter at _Schindler. I'm really active there. Best place to find me for sure. I have my Patreon linked in my Twitter bio. And yeah, be on the lookout for some cool stuff soon.
Yes, sir. Well, Mark, thanks for joining the show. Listeners, thanks for tuning in as always, and we'll see you next week with another episode of the Close Up Magic. Peace.